In this fast-paced world where everything moves quickly and we're on to the next thing before we finish what we're doing, we might stop a moment and reflect on our thoughts and how they echo through time. They are not a one-and-done phenomenon. They linger and hang around in our subconscious, waiting to surface again. Hi, I'm Beth Bonness, host of the Thought Echoes podcast. Join me as I chat with poet Katie Prince, author of Tell This to the Universe, as we kick off National Poetry Month here in the United States. We delve into the power of words, the magic of poetry, and the messy beauty of being human, with an invitation to pay attention to the quiet moments in our lives and let the language of poetry take us to unexpected places. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, I'm Katie Prince. I'm a poet and the author of Tell This to the Universe. The type of writer changed over the years. I wanted to write fiction when I was a little kid, and then I grew up and I found that poetry and essays were much better suited to my brain mind, that I was going to grow up to be a writer. I was too shy to be the kind of journalist that I would have preferred to be. First book, and I wrote the bulk of it when I was pretty young. I was 22, 23, 24 when I was writing it, and I was depressed and alienated, and I was, in love with someone who didn't like me. And I was living in a new state, and my parents had just moved away from my childhood home. So I was feeling very disoriented, and I wasn't sure what I was doing with my life or why. And I was reading all these books about physics and math and all these subjects I had no idea that I would be interested in while I was actually in school. But once I was out, it just suddenly opened up this whole new world for me. And in those years, also, two people who were really close to me died very suddenly, very young. And so I was grieving in this way that I hadn't before. And if I'm honest, I was completely unmoored as a human being. Looking back, it's been about 10 years. Looking back, I have a lot more empathy for her than I did when I was in the moment of it. I think I was doing the best that I could. But the best that I could was, to sort of withdraw from the world and write for survival. And so it's it's a complicated book. It's a book, it's funnier than it seems. It's pretty depressing, but it's funny too. I was trying to entertain myself as well as process. But I held on to the manuscript for years before I tried to publish it, because I couldn't tell, if it was good or if it was not good. And I couldn't tell if I was going to regret having written it, or, if anyone would get anything out of, the philosophical wonderings of a 24-year-old. And I'm glad now. I'm glad that I waited, because I think it would be really hard to try to publish such a personal thing at the time. And you have a different perspective on it now too, which is fun. So be able to look as a separate self.
We talked about the way I was introduced to you was through your book. My eldest daughter gives books for birthdays and Christmas, and she knows I love poetry. So she gave me a book, and as I'd mentioned, I had a stack of these. And then as soon as I got it, I contacted you after rereading the first part of the poem multiple times over multiple days, where I just couldn't get to the next one. I was so in love with isn't the right word, but I was so enamored by the space you hooked me in right off the bat. I too have a curiosity for things science and math. I've got a computer science background, so there's a certain amount of weight with that, but a curiosity about quantum physics and entanglement and, numbers are wonderful kind of thing. And so this dark matter, do you have the book with you? Could you read?
I do, yeah.
Read that first stanza, because that's the stanza I could not get past, didn't want to get past, but it's what sucked me into the book to begin with. So I could read it, but I'd love to hear you read it.
Oh, yeah, I would be happy to. Okay, so the first stanza.
Yes.
A version of me exists in 9 time zones. I wind clocks in 20 countries, and always the setting sun, and always the rising dark. And always the thought of you, usually as a man, sometimes a bear or glacier or black ocean.
I mean, that multiverse longing for somebody that's in there, yourself back then and yourself now and all the selves in between. There is such weight in a good way that comes through that first stanza as an introduction to the piece that just really spoke to me. So I'm glad you agreed to do, I'm glad you agreed to do the interview, which seems
I am so glad
perfect
it
for April.
spoke to you. I mean, it's such a weird thing to be a poet. You hear like a lot of nothing from people, and then you hear from like individual, you're like, oh,
Good.
someone has read it. Like it's poetry is not like one that gets
Yeah.
huge amounts of book tours or anything. So it's just like such a lovely thing to like know that someone you don't know, some sort of reaction to like I
Your
suppose
work.
it's the whole point of this podcast, right? How other, thoughts just like come into your life and
Right.
reverberate.
Right. And so a little PSA announcement for people reading, whether it's poetry or anything else. Authors love to hear when something affects you. Even if it's just, I love this line, which I kind of did because I hadn't read the whole thing when I reached out to you, because you don't know. There's, oftentimes you might get some initial feedback, but it feels good to know that somebody's on the other end
It
as you're speaking
does.
out to the universe.
It does, honestly. You do feel like a weird, like you're yelling into a canyon and like is
Right. But
anything.
you're in this big glass bowl that everybody can see.
Yeah.
You've presented yourself and not that you did it for feedback, but somehow if you had the wherewithal to actually go public with it, you'd like there to be some ping back.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
guess.
imagine I think particularly with this book, it's like trying to communicate. It's trying so hard to communicate. I think at the time, like I was so lonely, like I wasn't really able to like verbally express any of like vocally any of the things that I was thinking or feeling. Like I didn't know how, or I wasn't close enough to anyone to do that. So it is like you're really like it's trying to, you know, just want to give her a hug, you know.
Can you describe your relationship with your thoughts? I know in your notes sections you talked about being enthusiast for science and math, and it captures the fragments in our obsessions. So can you speak to? I mean, you've talked a little bit about how it was a way for you to articulate what you were feeling, but kind of life since then, or in general,
Yeah.
how you interact with your thoughts.
Man, I have such a complicated relationship with my thoughts. As a writer, like I love nuance. I love gray areas and like the world of what if sort of thought experiments. I think that's where the most interesting writing comes from when you don't really know where you're going. But like as a human being, I'm very uncomfortable in like times of uncertainty. When I'm feeling uncertain or nervous or sad or anything, like my primary response is to look for facts, things to be more concrete. I think most of us do. And I want answers, but I want the answers to be like real, true, like replicable via experimentation. So I think my thoughts at like their very base level are like super contradictory, like which is probably the core of this book, like that's dealing with a lot of things that typically fall under like the purview of religion and spirituality.
Mhm.
But I'm not a religious person and I'm a little bit wary of a lot of spirituality, at least in the ways people talk about it. But I love philosophy and science and nature and facts. And there's something to me that was like awe-inspiring, profoundly comforting in a way that I would describe probably as spiritual or religious, to like try to comprehend the vastness of the universe and like my insignificance inside of it, but like through math, like I'm like, this, how many zeros? Like it's just like you can't even, the scale of things is like so incomprehensible as to essentially be like magic.
Mhm.
Um,
What's your favorite poem in the book? Do you have a favorite?
There are ones that I like to read. I think it's so much harder than I would have thought. I think my favorite is probably the Acid Rain poem, which is like kind of an outlier in the book, but I
Mhm.
think it's like fun and horrifying. I like Dark Matter felt like a kind of like an Ars Poetica to me. It feels like sort of like my kind of feelings of like thoughts about what poetry is and why
Mhm.
it is. And so that one might be up there. Um,
Let's just encourage people to buy the
yeah.
book, which will have links for
Yeah.
buying the book.
There's so many poems. I like them all. A lot of them I give me like sad feelings, so it's hard to choose a favorite.
Yeah.
And it is interesting like how you feel about like reading like reading them aloud for audiences is like different. The ones that I choose are different than like maybe my favorites to like read on the page,
Yeah, that makes
which is,
sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
When you imagine your poetry's magic in terms of echoing over the ripple effects of it. So we talked about people reading it and how
Hmm.
it might affect them, whether you know how it affects them or not.
Hmm.
But can you speak to maybe it's the 10-year difference, the ripple effect between what you wrote 10 years ago and then, how you're looking back? What ripple effect do you see with yourself or around you from writing it 10 years ago?
That's a really good question. It's really hard to imagine like books echoing. Well, it's not hard to imagine books echoing over time, but it's hard to imagine that my book could echo, you know? Yeah, I've had such different relationships to it over the years. I think most poets feel this, like you'll go through a time where you'll like reread a manuscript or something and you'll be like, this is incredible, I am a genius. And then like, like 6 months later you'll read it and you'll be like, oh my God, it's trash. It's awful. So I suppose maybe you could call that like if you're thinking of like waves in a pond, like the Ned, I don't know what the words are, the trough and the amplitude. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Now everybody knows like the high points and the low points of it. I do think I think one thing that is interesting to me, the more like depressive sort of a state that I am in, the more physics like captures my attention because it's so like devoid of human things and physics and math. They feel so sterile and like away from the world. Like I have a second manuscript that I'm sort of shopping and working on, and it has nothing to do with science. It's like about weird Icelandic mythology and things
Mm.
like that, monsters and art and stuff. And it's very much more in the world than this one was when I was writing it, and I felt so far away from the world. So I think that is something that's interesting to me. What you don't realize is the baseline for your interest in certain sciences, certain areas. I'm still interested in physics and I still love it, but it doesn't have look like reading things about the universe feels more just like joyful, awe-inspiring than like at the time it was just like everything. It was all I could think about.
Well, it sounds like a good partner in what you were going through to have something to hold on to that
Perfect.
as it
And I
was before.
learned so much too, like that's the best part of it. Like you could be in a state like that and just like, be solipsistically kind of like stuck within yourself. Like I'm
Right.
I'm happy that my brain was like, look out to the vast emptiness and learn about it.
And kind of playing off of the entanglement concept of which you've got a quantum, very short
Hmm.
poem that you have in the book. But with how our relationships are so entwined, and there were so many experiences that you were going through with the death of your friends and, moving and all of that. When you were writing, was the inspiration for these poems, you obviously were thinking of people. So was it an image? Was it a feeling? What was it that kind of led you in to the topic that you swam around with this other person? Or maybe not. Maybe you had a concept and then the people popped in. So can you talk about how kind of that, how entangled you were with these other relationships as you were going through, your depression and the changes and whatnot,
Yeah.
and how that translated then into words on the page?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think there's like two parts of this because there's two different ways, I think. I think largely my poems will like start with an idea or like a phrase, a thought, a concept, or like an action image. And then I just follow that until something interesting happens. And like the language will take over at some point. A poem will go somewhere that I didn't expect it to. And I like those poems. There's something incantatory in the act of those poems. Like there's some loss of control. And I'm a person who loves control, to be in control of a situation, but you can't be in control of a poem if you want it to be any good, right? I think and then in this book, the ones that deal very concretely with people, like generally the people in the book are real, but they're far away. So they're like sort of these like misty, remembered versions of themselves, or they're warped and changed in some way. So they're themselves, but they're representatives of some larger idea. there's this differentiation we used to make in workshops, like between the actual truth and the poetic truth.
Hmm.
And I would say when it comes to like a lot of the people in this book, there's a lot of poetic truth. It's a lot of very much my perspective, like um certainly with the poems about my cousin and my ex-boyfriend, those ones were so related to the person as I knew them, as I remembered them, and I don't know what they would say about them, like I don't know how they would react to them. Yeah, I think there's something about that idea of entanglement, like with people who are far away or people you're not in contact with or can't be in contact with, that your thought of them in the world or your representation of them can somehow bring like a ghost form of them back for like a moment. I think that is maybe in my ideal world how people in poems could work. Like, like I feel reading this book, the like ghost version of my past self is there. We're not that different. I'm not that different, but she was certainly like a raw exposed nerve at the time. So it's maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's like the magic of it. You're bringing back a person from nothingness.
That's beautiful. You're talking about another manuscript that you're shopping around. So what is that piece about? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like weird. It's a weird book. I went to Iceland after this. I had never been to Iceland, which is where my family is from.
Mm.
But I got a residency there. So I went there for 3 weeks, and it was like a weird residency in that you were like completely alone, the smallest municipality in all of Iceland. There were like 40 people live there. So I was like alone in this museum most of the time. And I was writing these like weird, also lonely poems about like this imagined sorceress, because like the Icelandic tradition has the tradition of the kraftaskalds, which are like power poets. They're like poets that could make magic happen through the strength of the verse.
Oh,
And they're all men because patriarchy or whatever.
yeah.
So I was making up this one, and I felt like that was like it felt very strange, and most of the book isn't about this, it's just part of it, but the book largely I think was kind of born out of trying to continue writing in like when world life gets hard and worlds get like you have more stuff to do, you have more things, like how writing fits in and how art can like transform your relationship with yourself is kind of, it's got a lot of monsters and snakes, and I like it. No one else seems to yet, but we'll get there.
I'm looking forward to being able to read that.
It's definitely weirder than this one. So yeah, I'm working on that. I'm trying to, I'm not sure if it's like fully finished. I think that's probably part of it. Is like
Oh,
there's maybe something in it that's not like this one. The final finishing touches of it didn't happen for years. Like I had to come back and look and be like, oh, this was the problem. Like
uh,
it just changed these little things, and then it became a book that it is.
so you had in the back, you make reference, a shout out to all the places that published individual poems. So are you doing the same thing with this manuscript that you've got now? Have individual pieces been published, or that's not the process you're using this time?
I mean, it would be if people were publishing them.
Uh,
I've published probably like five or six of them,
hmm.
maybe. I think the weird thing about this book is like how this one, this is totally off topic, but like the world of publishing is like, or poetry, sometimes I think there are books that altogether are really strong, like the way the
Hmm.
poems build on each other
Mhm.
creates like a really strong narrative. I think, and that probably is what's happening with the second one, whereas this book had a lot of really strong individual poems.
Ah,
And when I was putting it together, it was actually kind of hard originally. I had to change a bunch of things because if they end in the same way, like they have like a strong ending, but you have a whole bunch of those in a row, it doesn't work in a book the way that it
hmm.
would work publishing individually.
Interesting.
So I
Good.
think that's maybe it. Or the other thing is that I need to go back and revise more, which I hate doing.
Do
It
you
feels so
have
hard.
do you have any parting words of wisdom for people
Mhm.
who don't experience poetry as a way to kind of encourage them to look at the world and life experiences differently.
There's nothing like poetry when you're in the depths of something. Truly, like no better method, I think, for distilling pure experience. All a poem does is pay attention. Like when it's really good, it doesn't like moralize or teach or interpret or distract. It just like takes you to the place and like gives you the time to have whatever experience it's leading you to. And maybe it's one that you've been avoiding or one that you're feeling like overwhelmed and suffocated by. Like everybody has that feeling of like, maybe not everybody, but certainly every poet. Like you read a poem one day and it doesn't really affect you. And then when you need it and you read it, it's like a completely different poem. They like show you that you're not alone in whatever thing that you're experiencing. And I think there's something wonderful like about reading something someone else has written. For a moment you've shared a thought and an experiment with some experience with someone you've never met, like someone who could have died centuries before you were born. That's like as close to magic as I think like the human world gets.
Mhm.
I also think more people should write poems. Like writing poems is essentially what you said, like it's a way of looking at the world and of looking at your life and like really looking. Attention is like the most valuable gift that like any of us can give. It's probably the reason most of the corporations now want it as a commodity.
Mhm.
Like being able to pay attention to the world around us and to what's happening and to the moment that we're in our physical experience and our mental experience is like what poetry is. And so I think reading it as a conduit and writing it as a conduit and all of it is worth doing, even if it like, you went to school and the only poems that you read were really difficult poems from the 1800s. There's so much out there now, like so much, and so much of it is so good. It's an exciting time to be a poet, and a terrifying time, but an exciting time.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie, for taking the time. And I will plug your current book, and when the new book comes out, I can go and update the page. Thank you so much for taking your time, and I'm excited going into Poetry Month, that if this encourages even one person to write some poetry, especially with that line you said that you keep writing, and then if for really good poetry, all of a sudden something opens up. And so if people can write and anticipate that and not, be worried about who's looking over their shoulder to say that's not any good. Just experience what it's like to write poetry when the words kind of take you someplace.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be good. I mean, the amount of bad poems I've written, my God. The amount of good poems that became good poems but started as bad poems, and then you delete the first like four stanzas and then you're like, I have a poem. I mean,
Well, it's
you
like what's
know,
the saying with, how do you ask a famous photographer, how many you take so many good pictures? And he goes, you take a lot of bad pictures. I mean, you have to
exactly.
output a lot, but not trying
Yeah.
to discourage somebody from not wanting to write poetry because they're looking for a good one, but just the process of writing
No, the
poetry.
process is the whole point. Value of it isn't whether it's good or not. It's like how the writing it has changed you or opened something up new for you or given you a different perspective on whatever. I think that's for me and realistically for any poet, like that's the value of it because you can't always be sure that someone's going to want to publish it, someone's going to want to read it. Like you have to do it for yourself and hope somebody wants to read it, like because we all do hope that someone wants that. And thank you also for reading the book. I'm really, really appreciative and glad to know that it has reached people that it needs to reach, that it should reach.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like you have like a weird child that like goes off into the world and you have no control over what it does. So
thank you so much. Well, I will post everything on there and look forward to the comments that come off and maybe it's some experiments that people do in terms of writing poetry. Thank you, Katie.
me too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Thought Echoes podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend. It helps get the word out. Until next time, keep exploring the echoes that shape your world.